Question number 1 on the reading portion of College Board's Test 4. Over the course of the passage, the narrator's attitude shifts from. So with these types of questions, when we talk about the narrator's attitude and how it shifts, this is a very big picture question. We have to zoom out and take a 40,000 foot view of this passage, roughly. What happens in the beginning of the piece? And then finally, what happens kind of at the end? Again, this is not exactly mathematical, where exactly the end starts, where the beginning ends, and everything like that. But when we talk about the attitude or the general understanding, we need to talk about general trends, general like mile markers to figure out what does he believe in the beginning and how does that change by the end. So let's talk a little bit about what he, how he thinks about the North Pole and his journey from beginning to end. So the beginning of the piece, he talks about my emotions are complicated and not readily verifiable. He's kind of confused. He doesn't really know why, why he's going to do this. The motives, line 9, the motives of this undertaking are not entirely clear. He doesn't understand why he's going to the North Pole. He doesn't understand why it matters. He just knows that he thinks fate has pushed him towards this path. And what does he find out by the end? That the reason why he's going, I am going forth on my own volition, line 53, 54. And then line 56, what I'm on the brink of knowing I see is not in an ephemeral mathematical spot but myself. So he finally then by the end works out why is it that he's doing this? He's trying to do it in order to better understand himself. He's a dangerous madman, and what I do is both a challenge to my egotism and a surrender to it. So over the course of the passage, the narrator's attitude shifts from beginning. He's kind of like musing on why he's doing this. He kind of knows that he wants to do it, but he doesn't quite know why. To finally realizing, this is for a journey. This is a self-exploration journey. The narrator's attitude shifts from fear about the expedition to excitement about it. Okay, so fear. The question is it fear? Is it fear that drives him? Fear about the expedition to excitement about it? Is he like scared and then he's like, but I'm super excited now? I don't think he ever shows fear. He kind of seems very stoic in the face of potential death and disaster because he acknowledges that no one's ever done this trip before and many people have died trying. I don't think he then gets excited about it. At the end, he still references back and harkens back to the dead of Bering, Franklin, DeLong. Again, I'm going to leave it. It just bothers me a little bit. What about fear about, doubt about his abilities to confidence in them? Again, does he say like, I don't think I can do it, guys. Who am I? I'm a nobody. And then he says like, yeah, I can do it. I'm going to crush it. I'm going to, beat all these other dead guys to the glory. I don't think that he vacillates in his confidence whatsoever. I think it's all about his exploration. It's all about his own inner journey in order to understand who he is and what he's trying to do and why he's trying to do what he wants to do. So the doubt about the confidence, I don't remember him saying like, I can't do it, and then saying like, yeah, I can do it. Especially by the end when he talks about how, he'll join the ghosts of Bering and Franklin or DeLong. That he almost is resigning himself to the real fate that he could still die, which I don't consider to be confidence. Let's take a look and see. Uncertainty of his motives to recognition of them. Ooh, I like that. Uncertainty of his motives. What does he say? My emotions are complicated and not readily verifiable. My motives of this undertaking are not entirely clear. Lines 9 to 10. That's like the line that we talked about in the beginning where we if we have to distill the first part of this piece in a few words, what is it? I think that line. He doesn't quite understand why he's doing what he's doing. And yet what happens at the end? Recognition of his motives. The reason why he's going on this trip, he's on the brink of knowing myself. That is the motive for why and the recognition of why he's going on this trip. I really like C. Again, this is going to be a quote question, so we'll be able to answer this pretty definitively with the quotes for number 2. But I really like C. I like on how it makes sense, especially in the context of A and B, which are very confusing to me. What about D? Over the course of the passage, the narrator's attitude shifts from disdain for the North Pole to appreciation of it. Disdain means that he hates it. He despises it. Does he despise the North Pole in the beginning, and then by the end he's like, I really appreciate the North Pole? Those are made up. Like additional details that the story just doesn't go into. He doesn't have disdain for the North Pole. He doesn't say I hate it, because otherwise, if he hated it, why would he go to it? And then finally, at the end, he's like, you know what? The North Pole's all right. I appreciate it. I feel like the North Pole is pretty understood and it's consistently understood throughout the whole piece. There's no reason for me to believe that he at first dislikes it and then appreciates it. It's just a thing, and it's just a object that he has to overcome, or a symbol for him to venture and succeed in. So I really think the answer is going to be C for number 1, but just to be sure, let's take a look at the answers in number 2. Question number 2 on the reading portion of College Board's Test 4. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So realize the previous question was about the narrator's general attitude and how it shifts, and we think the answer is going to be C. That, broadly speaking, in the beginning of the story, he's uncertain about his motives. He's not sure exactly why he's doing what he's doing. And finally, 2, recognition of them. By the end, he recognizes, this is why I want to do it. I want to do it to better understand myself. So I really think that C is going to be the answer, number 1. A, B, and D, the College Board is just putting words in our mouth at that point. They're trying to get us to believe things that just aren't true. So let's take a look at 2, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question. So forget about the answers for question number 1. Pretend like we think it's going to be C, but forget about all of them. We have to answer a very specific question. Over the course of the passage, the narrator's attitude shifts. How does the narrator's attitude shift? So we need to ask ourselves with these quotes, is this talking about the shift that happens from one point to the next, from point A to point B, from the beginning of the story to the end of the story? We need to find a quote that encapsulates everything that is going on in the story from beginning to end. Beginning, what does he believe? What does he believe at the end? And that has to be all encompassed in this individual quote. So let's read every quote and ask ourselves this basic question. Does this show how the narrator's attitude shifts? 10 to 12. For years, for a lifetime, the machinery of my destiny has worked in secret to prepare for this moment. Okay, that's not talking about the shift, maybe. Maybe you can argue the machinery for a lifetime, it's been working in secret. But that doesn't talk about how his beliefs have changed from beginning of the passage to the end of the passage. And intuitively, chances are the right answer is going to be towards the end of the passage, because only by the end do we understand what he really believes. Kind of a little hack for the question, I guess. The narrator's attitude shifts from 21 to 25. Let's look at, does this talk about how this guy's attitude changes from beginning to end? Yet, in freely willing this enterprise, in choosing this moment and no other, when the south wind will carry me exactly northward at a velocity of 8 knots, I have converted the machinery of my fate into the servant of my will. Let's think. This is saying, in choosing this moment, in saying I'm doing this right now, he has turned his fate, right, the invisible hand that pushes him towards his destiny, into the servant of my will. He's making it subservient to his own will and his own desire, saying, no, I'm going to do this on my own, accord. I'm going to do this on my own terms. I don't understand how this talks about how a shift in his attitude. Maybe you can argue that he used to think that it was fate that was driving him, and now it's his own will. I could see that. So I kind of, in a way, like B. But notice on how that doesn't have any parallel answer choices with number 1. That would have been a good answer in B, because it talks about, I used to think this way, and now I'm turning it in this way. I used to believe that it was just, fate that was drifting me away, but now I'm taking action into my own hands. But notice the narrator's attitude shifts from like a general resignation about his destiny to full control of it. That's not an answer choice, A, B, C, D. So B is a good bad answer for number 2, but it doesn't match up with any shift that was stated in 1, where we have A, B, and D, which are like bad, again, the bad ways that the College Board is trying to put words in our mouth. And then we have this answer, which is C, which is encapsulated in this last quote, which is probably going to be the answer, line 56 to 57. Let's take a look at 42 to 44. Does this talk about the shift in his attitude? And suppose you were to find, in spite of all, this wonderful place that everybody is so anxious to stand on. That's not a shift. He's not. That's like a fact. And suppose you were to find the North Pole. No shift. Just a fact. I'm not a fan of C. What about D? Does this talk about a narrator's shift in attitude? What am I on the brink of knowing I now see is not an ephemeral mathematical spot, but myself. So this is a nice, at the end of the piece, we finally come full circle and understand what was going on. That what choice provides the best evidence to the answer to the previous question? How does his attitude shift? He initially thinks that this quest is just an ephemeral nothingness. It's just like the thing he has to do. He needs to find this mathematical spot. We need to go to this journey and go to the North Pole for glory and for conquest and whatever. But what does he realize? I now know it is not this ephemeral or this fleeting or short-lived mathematical abstraction, just a thing that you go to, but he realizes this whole journey and his thinking and his thought process to do this crazy thing is in order to better understand himself. And that nicely matches up, D, with answer choice C for number 1, that his attitude shifts from uncertainty of his motives to recognition of them. And what are those uncertainty of his motives? He's like, I don't know, what is it? What is this ephemeral, kind of difficult to quantify, difficult to place, short-lived thing? Why am I doing it? What is the purpose of me going to the North Pole? Is it for my soul? Is it for, does it do any good? Will it carry you from Gothenburg, line 30? We talk about why would you want to do this? And then finally he says, I'm doing it in order to understand myself. The motives of his journey are now clear. We go from uncertainty to certainty by saying, I'm not doing this for some random, stupid reason. I'm doing it to understand myself. The answer to number 2 is going to be D, and that nicely matches up with the answer to number 1, which asks, how does his attitude shift? It shifts from uncertainty of his motives. Why am I doing this? What's the reason? To recognition of them. I'm doing it in order to better understand myself. 1C, 2D.